Hey friends, tonight we creep out of the noisy taverns and muddy marketplaces and slip into the hush before sunrise, a narrow slice of time when the medieval world is mostly shadows and breath, and the only people stirring are bakers, watchmen, and a small, slightly mysterious brotherhood known as chantry priests. Before we pull back the wooden door and step into their candlelit chapel, do me a quick favor. Tap the like button if slow burn history helps you unwind, and drop a comment telling me what hour you're listening from. I love mapping our little, drowsy community across the globe. And of course, hit subscribe so we can keep meeting here on the edge of sleep. All right, take a breath. Picture a walled city, sometime in the late 1300s. Could be York, could be Rouen, could be Bruges. Anywhere the bell towers lean close like steepled fingers. Outside, the streets smell of damp timber and last night's hearth smoke, but the sky is the chilly gray of pewter as dawn tries to pry open the eastern horizon. We're standing at the side door of a collegiate chapel, smaller than the Grand Cathedral, but still ornate enough that every arch is carved with looping vines. This is a chantry, a purpose-built pocket of the church's vast real estate, endowed with land or rents so that priests can do one thing on repeat: say masses for the soul of whoever paid for the building. Push the door. It groans but yields, and instantly the outside world falls back like a stage curtain. Stone walls swallow sound. Rush-strewn floors hush your footfalls. The air is resin-sweet. Last night's incense still clings to the vaults like ghost smoke. On a slender wooden settle, two figures in dark wool cassocks are wrestling themselves awake. They're chantry priests, and if you asked them who they work for, they'd point to the tomb slab in the floor or the painted effigy near the altar. Their employer is dead, has been for years, but in medieval logic, that makes the job all the more urgent. Every sunrise, these men must chant a mass, knees chilled by stone, to keep that soul moving through purgatory like a traveler paying road tolls. Let's linger by a pillar and watch their pre-dawn routine. First, water for washing. One priest holds a dented bronze ewer, the other cups his hands, and the icy splash makes him blink hard. Cleanliness isn't about hygiene, it's spiritual readiness. Then they fish candles from a wooden coffer. Beeswax is expensive, so the sticks are thin, patched by dribbles from older tapers. They tilt them into iron prickets and strike a flint. 1, 2, 3 sparks. There, a timid flame crawls up the wick. In that flicker, you see how young the junior priest is, maybe 22, cheeks raw with the beginnings of winter. The senior, a man in his 40s, has candle-shadowed eyes, dark crescents from decades of rising before dawn. His voice, when he finally speaks, is papery from silence. Prime bell soon. A muffled clang coils through the nave. The sacristan in the adjoining parish church is pulling the rope for prime, the first office of the day. It's their signal. They lift linen albs from a peg. The cloth is stiff with starch, smells faintly of lye and cold damp where it never quite dried overnight. Over that goes the stole, narrow and embroidered. Then the chasuble, a heavy, faded thing, the color of late autumn leaves. If you've ever worn a sodden blanket while camping, you know the drag on the shoulders. Multiply that by 40 mornings a season, and you start to sense why permanent slump is an occupational hazard for chantry clergy. Before Mass begins, there's a haunting little ritual called the fructus capellani, the priest's portion. A boy from the households attached to the chantry, really just a wiry teenager bribed with leftover bread, slinks in bearing a wooden trencher. On it sits a heel of rye bread, a thumb length of cheese, and a cup of small ale still fizzing. This isn't breakfast, it's part of the endowment's rules. The donor's will decreed the priests should get sustenance before praying so their stomachs wouldn't rumble, distracting them from intercession. They cross themselves, mumble grace, and nibble. The bread crust rasps against molars. The ale is sharp with yesterday's yeast. It won't fill them, but it locks them into the chain of pious transactions. Eat, then pray, then maybe the dead man's soul inches closer to light. Mass itself is less theatrical than the cathedral liturgy you might picture. No polyphonic choir, no glittering monstrance, just two voices weaving Latin through unheeded dust motes. Yet it's strangely hypnotic. Listen. Introbo ad altare Dei, ad Deum qui laetificat juventutem meam. The words flutter up into ribs of stone, resonate, fall like feathers. The junior priest's pronunciation slips on certain diphthongs. He's Normand by birth, trained in a rural grammar school where they taught conjugations by beating them into memory with a hazel rod. The senior corrects him with a subtle throat clearing. This matters because precision is currency here. The soul they're praying for could be stuck in purgatory until every grammatical debt is paid. Between Kyrie and Gloria, let's drift to the chantry side wall. See that triptych? Middle panel shows Saint Michael weighing souls. Only the balances are suspiciously tipped toward salvation, an unsubtle nod to the benefactor's optimism. The left wing depicts the donor kneeling in armor, with his wife in jeweled wimple beside him. But look closer at the paint. Worm tracks riddle the oak board, and candle soot has yellowed the whites of their eyes into something jaundiced. No matter. Every glance the priests throw that way is a silent reminder. This is why they're here and why they'll be here long after we stroll back into daylight. Now, you might be wondering, was this cushy employment or a slow drudgery? Records hint at both. On paper, the endowment provided modest income, a few shillings from tenant rents, a share of a local mill's grain, rights to collect tithe pigs each Martinmas. But money is only as good as the bailiff's honesty, and bailiffs are notorious gamblers. Many chantry priests found themselves chasing overdue pennies, trudging to market towns to shout at stewards while their candles guttered back home. Some nights they moonlighted as notaries, copying land deeds by rushlight just to afford new boots. Ah, boots. After the concluding "Ite missa est," the priests shuffle to the vestry and kick off their cracked leather shoes, warming numb toes at a brazier of cherry embers. If it's winter, frost steams faintly off wool. The junior rubs his heels, whispering that a rat nibbled through the lining last week. Rats adore chantries. Quiet, rarely disturbed, crumbs from offertory loaves. One bold rodent reportedly gnawed into a coffin behind the altar, scattering bone splinters like millet. The priests laid no trap. Instead, they added an extra prayer for the deceased's bodily integrity, hoping divine intervention doubled as pest control. While cassocks are folded, a bell rings outside, this one higher, brisk. The porter at the main church is unlocking gates. Townsfolk will arrive soon for lauds. But our priests have a brief gap before chanting the office, and here's where routine slips into peculiarity. Because each chantry had its own house rule, some quirky as a codpiece. In this foundation, priests must walk 3 times around the tomb, singing the psalm Miserere Mei in plain song, barefoot on cold flagstones, as penance for any lapses in devotion. The junior mutters about chilblains. The senior reminds him that wealthy patrons loved visible piety. Better sore feet than a revoked stipend. Circling done, they retreat to a loft cluttered with wax runoff, moth-gnawed surplices, and a lectern grooved by years of elbows. Here they keep the bedrolls, long parchment lists of other benefactors' names. Reading them aloud is both duty and internal marketing. Demonstrate diligence, and the living might commission their own chantry, growing the institution like ivy over stone. Names spool out: Alicia, Thomas, Yasabo, Guillaume, until you lose track and float in the drone, like rain on a thatch roof. Outside, dawn has fully broken. Stained glass windows, small but jewel bright, catch the sun and set blood-red pools on the floor. For a moment, the chantry looks alive, breathing light. The priests glance up, pupils contracting. Maybe, just maybe, they feel the benefactor's presence. Or maybe they just envy the tradesmen now hauling carts through awakening streets. Men who'll earn coin in daylight rather than candle smoke and secrecy. Before we leave, let's note one last detail. By statute, these priests cannot marry or even share meals with women inside the chantry precinct. Yet historians keep finding spindle whorls and pins in the drainage channels, tiny artifacts of forbidden feminine company. Did laundresses deliver fresh linen and linger? Did the senior priest nurse a quiet affection for the widow who brought eggs each Thursday? Medieval rules were iron. Medieval hearts were soft clay. Candles gutter. Birdsong seeps through the arrow-slit windows, and our 2 clerics prepare to chant lauds, the second station of their daily relay. They'll pace themselves through prime, terce, sext, nun, vespers, and compline before sleep claims them near midnight, only to rise again before dawn. A life measured not in adventures, but in steady drips of prayer, like water wearing stone. And that's where we'll pause, right on the cusp of morning commerce booming outside and holy murmurs swelling within. If you'd like to keep wandering these cloistered corridors, learn what the priests ate for midday pottage, how they dodged plague funerals, and why a rogue bell ringer once trapped them in the crypt, just let me know, and we'll unroll the next chapter together. Until then, blow out your own candle, pull the blanket up, and drift. A soft rain has started. The kind that barely taps the roof tiles, yet slips through every chimney and crack until the whole chantry smells of wet limestone and extinguished hearths. Inside the dim loft, the 2 priests are hunched over a wooden tally board, scratching tiny vertical lines with an iron stylus to mark each psalm already spoken since dawn. They could keep count in their heads, but the board is proof, evidence should the archdeacon drop by unannounced, that every obligation is met and no soul is shortchanged a single verse. The senior lifts his head first. "Tierce," he murmurs, which means it is roughly the 3rd hour after sunrise, time for another round of chanting. They descend the spiral stair that corkscrews down from the loft. Each step is worn into a shallow dish by centuries of sandal leather. In damp weather, the treads sweat, so the junior grips the central newel like it might whirl away. Halfway down, they pass the wall niche where a crumpled wax figurine sits stuck to the stone. Local superstition says you press a tiny effigy there and recite the Pater Noster, and bad toothaches will melt just as the candle wax does. The priests do not endorse such folk magic, but neither do they scrape it off. Better tolerate harmless hope than pick fresh fights with parish widows. At the foot of the stair waits Brother Simon, the chantry's hired verger. His job is mostly keys and sweeping, but today his worry lines seem deeper than usual. "Messer," he whispers to the senior, "the Glovers' Guild are in the nave. They want their memorial mass moved forward to Saturday." Guild funerals are lucrative, heavy with offerings, but the schedule is already crowded. The senior priest's eyelid twitches, the first hint of frustration we've seen. He smooths his stole and steps aside to confer, leaving the junior to light new candles along the altar rail. Watch the younger man strike the flint. Sparks spit, sulfur flares, and in the flare he cannot help noticing his fingernails, rimmed black from scraping soot off last night's furable. He knows the bishop's canon on personal cleanliness, but there are no servant boys to polish his hands, no time to soak them in rosewater as cathedral canons do. He wipes them on his sleeve, quietly, hoping no guild elder will inspect too closely. The bell for Tias hangs in a wooden cage outside, but the verger's arm is weak today. Each pull produces a lopsided clang. Still, the sound wafts through open lancet windows, spilling across Market Square where stallholders are unrolling bolts of cloth. 1, 2, 3 notes. Townsfolk cross themselves automatically, as if spiritual muscle memory flexes even while they haggle for onions or fleece. Inside, our priests begin the Deus in adjutorium. Their chant is steadier now, warmed by 2 previous offices. The rain drums harder, on roof, on lead drain pipes, counterpoint to the plainsong. Between verses, the junior's gaze drifts to the chapel's south door, bolted but rattling in the draft. Behind that door lies the priest's garden, a generous term for a rectangle of soil fenced by willow hurdles where kitchen herbs lean in perpetual shade. The junior remembers the donor's charter, promising a fruitful garden for the priest's sustenance. In truth, the soil is clay, puddled and acidic, good only for watercress and moss. He sighs, and the sigh becomes part of the music, a faint exhalation between Gloria Patri and Sicut Erat. After tears, they shed vestments again. Now comes clerical admin, unglamorous but vital, copying obit lists, calculating rents, sealing letters. Ink is costly, so they dilute oak gall mixture until the brown almost fades. Still, every stroke must be crisp. Patrons judge piety by handwriting as much as by homily. The junior forms the name Domina Johanna de Felton in angular textura. He has never met Johanna. She passed 20 winters ago, but her nephew just sent half a mark to keep the masses going. Money again. Always money. Speaking of which, the senior priest rummages under the desk for a small iron box. Inside, 6 clipped pennies, 3 French sous, and a ragged leather tally strip, the week's income. He tips the clinking pile onto the table. We witness an almost comical scene. 2 men of God squinting, weighing silver bits with fingers stained by sacramental wine, trying to decide which coins are too light, shaved by dishonest traders, and which are passable. Shaved coins could condemn them if the king's exchequer audits the chantry. They set doubtful pieces aside. Later, they'll risk spending them at a distant fair, where nobody knows their faces. A knock interrupts. It is Alice, the miller's daughter, cheeks ruddy from the weather, carrying a basket of rye crusts and wilted leeks, her father's tithe in kind. She is not allowed past the screen, so the verger takes the basket and slides a tally bead along a cord. Alice lingers, eyes darting to the junior priest. Perhaps she likes his earnest forehead. Perhaps she enjoys how quickly he looks away, guilty. The church forbids, but human attention is its own warmth. She curtsies, rainwater dripping from her braid, and is gone. Mid-morning lessons begin. Chantry priests are often expected to teach choir boys in plain chant and psalm recitation. Today, only 2 boys appear, one coughing, the other picking at a scab. They kneel on a woven mat, and the junior priest starts the antiphon, Benedicite. The coughing boy wheezes loudly on every long melisma. The junior remains gentle, guiding pitch with his hand, but inside he worries. If the plague rumors from the port town are true, any cough could herald disaster. He makes a quiet mental note to burn rue and juniper at vespers, a patriarchaic smoke to please both God and fear. You might ask, do chantry priests ever leave these walls? Yes, but rarely. Once a fortnight, they process to the parish cemetery to sing the placebo and the dirige for all forgotten souls, names lost, graves unmarked. Today is that fortnight. They hat and cloak, both black, though the junior's hem is shiny where grease from the kitchen brazier has soaked in. Rain has eased to a drizzle, but the graveyard path is viscous mud. They pick their way with short steps, skirts gathered. At the lich gate, they pause to light hand candles. Guttering flames cast giant shadows against leaning headstones. The older priest intones, "I will walk before the Lord in the land of the living." And if you listen beyond him, you can hear the town crier farther off, announcing a merchant ship's arrival. 2 worlds overlapping, trade and transcendence. Back in the chantry, it is finally time for their true breakfast. Pottage thickened with yesterday's barley and a single precious egg poached in the broth. They eat in the refectory alcove, feet on warmed bricks, reading aloud a chapter of St. Gregory's Dialogues. Monastic rule demands scripture with meals. The egg yolk runs gold. The junior smears it across bread with almost indecent longing. He hasn't tasted meat since Candlemas, and Lent looms. The senior notes the look, but only says, "Patience, brother." Afternoon drips by in manuscript copying. Candle stubs are too short, so they shove the table close to the narrow window, using the meek gray daylight. Quills squeak. In margins they add tiny doodles, a fox in cleric robes stealing a goose, perhaps a sly commentary on corrupt archdeacons. Humor is a sin if it mocks the faith, but a wink at authority passes unnoticed. Around none, the 9th hour, the verger bursts in, eyes wide. "A noble party approaches," he says, "bound for pilgrimage. They seek lodging for the night. Hospitality is holy law, yet the guest hall roof leaks and there are not enough clean linens." The senior priest groans softly. Account books will suffer, but refusal would brand them inhospitable. He orders beds swept, rushes changed, and instructs the junior to fetch ale from the barrel they were saving for Easter. "We will stretch watered wine," he says. "God multiplies grace, but we must dilute the claret ourselves." Twilight seeps. Vespers echo now through a fuller chapel. Pilgrims kneel, guild elders linger, candlelight crowds the stone ribs. Our priests' voices weave among strangers, steady despite fatigue. When they reach the Magnificat, a draught sets the candles shimmying, wax tears course down. Shadows leap across the donor's effigy, making the stone knight seem briefly alive, chin trembling, hands loosening from prayer. No one else notices, but for a heartbeat, the junior priest wonders if purgatory has cracked open, if their morning labors have summoned the patron for inspection. Compline ends. Pilgrims retire to the hall, roisterers to taverns, but our priest's day is not done. They must pound offerings, copper farthings sticky with wax, a foreign jeton, 2 tokens from a shrine in Canterbury. Tokens are worthless to most, but to the chantry they're proof of favor, something to boast in next year's charter. The senior tucks them into the reliquary like hidden pearls. Finally, near midnight, cassocks off, bones aching, they roll themselves in thin wool blankets on pallet beds behind the altar screen. No mattress, just straw lashed by rope. Rain has ceased. Only the drip of eaves punctuates the dark. Before sleep, the junior whispers, "Do you think we prayed enough?" The senior, eyes already shut, answers, "For tonight." And that is the closest thing to comfort he can give. So ends another rotation in the slow clockwork of the chantry. Prayers like cogs, candles like gears, souls the unseen weights driving everything forward. Tomorrow, before dawn, it turns again. Moonlight pushes through the clerestory like spilled milk, bright enough that the bats weaving under the rafters cast crisp shadows on the flags. Somewhere outside, a fox yips, and its cry bounces off the cloister walk so sharply that every pilgrim lodged in the guest hall shifts, half dreaming of wolves. Down in the sacristy, however, both priests are wide awake. The royal herald reached them an hour ago, breathless, cloak soaked with road dust and anticipation. The Queen's Chamberlain plans to inspect every endowed foundation along the Great North Road, beginning with this tiny chantry at prime tomorrow. Inspection means 2 things: elaborate ceremonial fuss and merciless account audits. The senior priest, Brother Matthias, has seen one before. He still remembers the taste of terror when the royal clerks unrolled their parchment and asked why the Easter obit mass for Sir Godfrey had been delayed in plague year. Technically, they forgave him, but the fine nearly starved the house for a season. Now, in the yellow shimmer of one stubby tallow, he spreads the ledger scroll again, smoothing it flat with trembling fingertips. Each entry must add, each seal string must still be attached. A single cracked seal, a single ink blot, and the crown can declare the entire endowment mismanaged and fold it into the royal purse. The junior priest, Brother Elfric, barely 22 winters and still occasionally reciting psalms in the wrong mode, paces barefoot on the cold stone. What if the chamberlain asks about the new misericord seats? He whispers. We carved them ourselves, but the funds came from the candle rents, not listed yet. Matthias answers without looking up. We call them repairs, not improvements. Repairs are allowed from surplus wax income. Remember that. He licks the quill, scratches a note in the margin. Ink smears. He mutters a penitential under his breath and blots. Across the nave, The verger Simon is dragging trestle tables into a line beneath the rood screen. Each table leg screeches. He'll cover them later with a linen so short the ends look like tongues. The royal clerks will sit there, tally beads clicking while they sip weak ale out of silver mazers. Mazers the chantry owns but almost never uses, because polishing them means rubbing away slivers of desperately needed silver. Elfric finds the mazers now, locked in the ambry. He polishes anyway, using a scrap of wool plucked from the choir boy's discarded surplus. Each circular reflection shows his own anxious face, pale, thin, and dotted with charcoal dust. He'd been cleaning censers earlier.
Time slips. At Matins bell they should be chanting, but tonight Matthias suspends the hour, citing necessitas in canon law. Instead, they copy lists of obligations: one Mass weekly for Johanna de Felton, one annual Trental for Sir Godfrey, bread alms on Lady Day for 10 poor widows, 2 pounds of wax to burn perpetually for Henry the Draper's soul. Elfric writes the wax note twice, once on parchment and once on a scrap of sheepskin set aside for clandestine courier. Because tomorrow, between pillows and pottage, he intends to slip that sheepskin to a friar heading south. The friar can carry news to Master Roger of Lincoln, the talented illuminator who owes them favors. If inspection goes badly, they might need a sympathetic hand to re-letter damaged folios before the next surprise audit. Even priests run quiet conspiracies. Ink is as potent as blades when the treasury hovers.
Dawn creeps. Chantry bells normally ring louds to an empty nave, but thanks to the inspection rumor, townsfolk already crowd the porches, hoping to glimpse velvet livery or royal liveries. Some carry ailments to show the Queen's leech. Others clutch petitions, thinking a chamberlain can erase taxes. The priests don't relish spectators while they chant, yet the charter commands open doors. So when Matthias raises the bell rope, he rings with extra vigor, 7 solemn peals that roll through the square like hammer strokes. The crowd hushes. Lauds begins. Candle flames look watery. Overnight drafts have soaked the wicks. Elfric, voice soft from sleeplessness, leads the antiphon Dominus regnavit, decorum indutus est. Matthias underpins with a drone an octave below, giving the chant unexpected depth, like distant thunder under a gentle rain. Several laywomen, gasping at the sudden beauty, cradle their infants closer. Even the mule, tied by the porch, lowers its chewing. Mid-psalm, the south doors groan wide. A knot of travelers push through. Herald's tabard first, blue with gold-crowned lions, then 2 scribes in brimmed hats, and finally the chamberlain himself, Sir Cedric de Morley, lean and hawk-nosed, gloved despite the season, smelling faintly of camphor and lavender. He pauses, listening to the chant, eyes flicking across vaulting, windows, altar plate, calculating value like a merchant counts sheep. Yet he does not interrupt. Etiquette says he must not speak until the office closes, so he simply stands, dripping road water, while the choir finishes the Benedictus. Matthias's palms sweat so badly the Psalter pages stick, but he flips them smoothly, determined. When the final Amen dies, Sir Cedric inclines his head half an inch. Brothers, by your leave, we begin. Formalities rush in, documents produced, seals inspected. One clerk sniffs at parchment to confirm age. Fresh parchment smells of lime residue, old parchment of dust and candle smoke. Another clerk asks for the Liber Obligatonum, the obligations book. Matthias hands it over prayerfully, but inside he begs every rubric to shine. The clerk flips to Easter week, notes something, nods. Relief trickles. But then, wax account for perpetual lights? The clerk asks. Elfric's heart bangs. He hasn't rewritten the candle ledger yet. Yesterday's columns ended mid-sum. The clerk taps blank space. In arrears, I see. Matthias replies instantly. Ink shortage, sir. We kept totals on tally sticks. The verger will fetch them. Quick thinking, maybe credible. The clerk frowns but consents. Simon sprints to find maple tallies. Each notch must align with coin counts. Simon mutters numbers, saws at air. They return. The clerk measures notches with brass calipers. Satisfactory, though he sniffs again. While tallies clack, Sir Cedric wanders. He peeks behind the rood screen and nearly knocks over a small wooden chest. Inside lie those half-shaved pennies the priests hoped to pass off later. Cedric raises an eyebrow. Clipped silver? Matthias bows deeper. Offerings from strangers, my lord. We segregate suspect coin awaiting melt and recoinage. True enough, in imagination. Cedric grunts, non-committal. He will undoubtedly levy a fine for improper currency storage, but that is cheaper than an accusation of fraud. The inspection drags to sext noon. Scribes' stomachs rumble. Protocol dictates the priests feed them. Elfric races to the kitchen hearth where a pot of peas has simmered since dawn. He ladles watery stew into wooden bowls, counts breadcrumbs to float on top, 6 each, sign of modest plenty. Meanwhile, Simon fetches the prized Easter ale anyway, no time to stretch wine. Better to appease taste buds than risk harsher penalties. During the meal, Cedric asks casual questions. How many poor fed weekly? How often is the chantry bell rung for plague victims? Is Brother Elfric ordained priest yet, or still a deacon? Has Bishop's visitation been recorded? With each answer, Matthias adds a quiet citation, as per Synod of Exeter, or according to Urban IV's decree. He knows auditors respect footnotes as soldiers respect spears. But Cedric's final query dangles sharper. Who currently holds patronage since Lady Eleanor's lineage ended? A silence. The priests know the legal answer is complicated. Eleanor's grandniece, a minor living in Gascony, technically owns the advocen, but local gentry eye the vacancy hungrily. Matthias replies, until her coming of age, the bishop holds it in trust. Cedric records this, ink scratching like a blackbird claw. The sun tilts west. The inspection ends with Cedric announcing no grave deficiencies, save minor fines. Chalky relief washes the priests. Cedric accepts a rolled copy of their statuta and departs. But before leaving, he lingers at the door, addressing Elfric personally. That chant at lauds, keep it polished. The queen is fond of solemn voices. Compliment? Threat? Both. Evening falls purple. The priests might collapse, but Simon appears holding a broken wax seal. During the bustle, someone rifled the sacristy chest. A small polster is gone, one with jeweled bosses, donor gift worth many marks. Theft under their watch equals scandal. Matthias slumps onto a bench. Exhaustion turns bile.
Aelfric thinks of the strangers crowding earlier, traveling merchants, penitents, Cedric's entourage. But suspicion falls easiest on the ragged pilgrim who lingered near the Ambry door, the one Aelfric shooed away gently. He recalls the pilgrim's eyes, fierce, opportunistic.
They must recover the book before rumors spread. Yet night cloaks roads, and the town gate locks soon. Matthias makes a desperate choice. Aelfric and Simon will slip through the postern gate with lanterns, find the pilgrim at the tavern row, and bargain or wrest the Psalter back. Meanwhile, Matthias stays to chant Vespers alone, praying his voice counts double tonight.
Thus we find our junior priest, lantern swinging, hurrying through puddled alleys. Rain earlier has turned gutters into small rivers, catching torchlight in bronze ribbons. Simon trots beside, winded but determined. Hidden beneath his cloak shines the head of a processional cross, solid brass, also donor property, also heavy as gilt, intended as collateral if negotiation fails. They reach the Golden Pike Tavern. Through shutter slats spill lute music, dice clatter, anvil laughter. Inside, smoke blurs faces, but Aelfric's lantern slices a corridor of light straight to a shadowed booth where the ragged pilgrim drinks alone. On the bench beside him, yes, the gem-bossed Psalter, barely concealed by cloak.
Aelfric approaches, heart in throat. He braces for threats, but the pilgrim speaks first, voice low, cultured. "You came sooner than I hoped, brother. Sit." Surprised, Aelfric obeys. Simon stays standing, hand on cross haft. The pilgrim reveals himself. Not a vagrant, but Robert de Bruaz, third son of a baron, secret collector of relics and scarce manuscripts. He claims he took the Psalter not for profit, but to protect it. Your roof leaks, jeweled books rot. He proposes a trade. He will sponsor fresh roof tiles and supply new candles if the Chantry loans him select volumes each winter. Essentially, patronage by blackmail.
Aelfric is torn. The offer could save their leaking sanctuary, but Matthias's fury and moral stance would be volcanic. Yet Simon whispers, tiles could stop mold behind the altar. Pragmatism cedes. They agree to parley tomorrow with Matthias present. Robert returns the Psalter, gem bosses intact. Simon clutches it like a newborn. Back through dark lanes, mission accomplished, but conscience bruised. They enter by postern as Compline bell tolls. Matthias finishes chanting alone, voice hoarse, but smiles when he sees the rescued book. Then Aelfric explains the bargain. Smile falters. A storm of Latin ensues. Simony, sacrilege, bargaining with thieves. Yet at the end Matthias sighs. We shall meet this Robert. Perhaps Providence uses even a thief to mend a roof. Midnight again. Priests on straw pallets, eyes open. Aelfric asks, will God forgive our compromise? Matthias is silent a long time. Finally, if the souls we serve remain prayed for, perhaps he already has. A rat scurries across the tiles, and outside, the fox yips again. The sunrise that creeps through the nave today feels different, thicker, almost syrupy, the way light looks when rain is waiting in the clouds. Brother Aelfric notices it first as he lifts the sacristy shutter,
A bruise-colored sky pressing low on the treetops. Birds flying in frantic zigzags as if they smell thunder hiding behind the hills. Good omen or bad, he wonders aloud. Brother Matthias, already pinning his cloak with a pewter clasp, answers without turning. All omens are invitations for hard work.
Hard work is precisely what summons them to the west aisle, where the roof beams groan like old sailors. Overnight, a slate dropped, just one, but enough to punch a fist-sized hole through the lofting, and the rain that followed left a dark comet stain on the lime wash. To the royal chamberlain, that stain would have looked like negligence personified. To Robert de Bruce, the aristocratic relic poacher who stole and returned their jeweled psalter, it looks like opportunity.
Robert arrives at Terce, punctual as a courtier. He sheds his traveling hood, revealing hair cropped shorter than fashion, soldier's habit. In one hand he carries a rolled vellum sheet, in the other a wooden tube sealed with crimson wax. Matthias meets him beneath the beam, where 2 drops plop in succession onto the stone. "You come to barter?" the priest says, voice stiff. Robert smiles like a man holding better cards. "Not barter, father, partner." He unrolls the vellum. Drawings of truss braces, annotations in a tidy clerical hand, and at the bottom a simple contract. The contract proposes. Robert will finance 2 cartloads of fresh oak beams and a crew of roofers from York. In return, the Chantry loans him 3 specified manuscripts, each Advent season for private study. Under escort, Matthias notes, as if a priestly chaperone could stop a nobleman from vanishing across the sea. The loan period lasts 40 days. Damages incur stiff penalties paid in silver. Robert has even stamped the draft with his signet, a falcon stooping on a hare. Matthias reads every clause, lips moving. Elfric hovers, eyes on the sagging timber. One more winter storm, and that beam will crash onto the choir stalls. Pragmatism thumps under his ribs. Yet conscience rasps. Books are souls in vellum coats. Lending them to a thief is gambling with souls. Matthias folds the contract. "I will present this to the bishop's vicar," he says. Robert's eyebrow arches. "That could take months. Your beam may not wait." He taps the damp stain. A 3rd drop falls. Negotiations pause for sext. Bells ring. Robert kneels in a side stall, appearance of piety mandatory. His whisper-quiet responses to the psalms reveal he knows the office better than many monks. Elfric notices and files the information. This baron's son had clerical schooling. Perhaps he once intended holy orders before family obligations dragged him into secular schemes. After the office, Matthias offers Robert frugal dinner: barley bread, onion broth, a single cheese wedge. Robert eats without complaint. Between bites, he reveals why he really wants the manuscripts. Hidden within their margins is a cyclical calendar of eclipses. His astrologer cousin hopes to refine a map of planetary conjunctions to predict political unrest. "Rebellion brews when Mars occludes Jupiter," he says with unnerving casualness. Better to chart it than be surprised. Matthias sips broth slowly. Astrology teeters on heresy, but kings themselves consult star charts. Refusing might label the Chantry backward.
Agreeing might invite ecclesiastical suspicion. Catch-22, bound in calfskin. In the refectory doorway appears Simon, cheeks flushed. He whispers to Elfric that two men in burgundy livery lurk outside the porch, asking about a missing silver mazer belonging to the Queen's chamberlain. Panic prickles. The mazer, the priests lent it during inspection, was returned, but Elfric forgot to lock the ambry afterward. Could it be stolen? He hurries to check. The shelves are neat, yet one bowl is gone. Heart in throat, he imagines those burgundy guards dragging him to castle cells for petty theft. Robert finds him there, breathing hard. "Something lost?" he asks. Elfric, too exhausted to dissemble, blurts the truth. Robert considers, then says, "Let me speak with the guards. Perhaps I can persuade them it was a clerical miscount." Fear becomes gratitude thick as honey. Elfric nods.
Robert exits, cloak swirling. Through the open door, Elfric watches him greet the guards with easy authority. Words drift back. "I saw the mazer packed with his lordship's other plate. Perhaps check the pannier again." His tone brooks no challenge. The guards, though skeptical, know noble rank when they see it. They bow and depart. Crisis evaporates like candle smoke. That evening, the brothers convene chapter. Candles ring the stone table. Matthias, Elfric, Simon, and two aging lay clerks. Agenda: roof peril, missing mazer, Robert's proposal. Matthias reads aloud the contract. Debate follows, hot as tallow drip. "He's a thief," says Simon, "but thieves can keep promises when it profits them. Books will travel in winter wagons and warp in damp," frets the senior lay clerk.
"Without a roof, we'll lose them all to rain anyway," counters Elfric.
Matthias listens, thumb on his rosary. At last he stands. "We are guardians of memory," he says, "not jailers of parchment. A book unread is a candle under a bushel. I propose we accept, but with safeguards." He drafts amendments. Robert must hire 2 roofers from the adjoining parish, provides local labor. Books travel inside waxed leather cases. A surety of 50 marks deposited with the bishop's treasurer. Any astrological conclusions published must credit the Chantry scriptorium. The brethren nod. Terms fair, survival likely. At Compline, they sing In manus tuas, Domine, and the echo under repaired vaulting already sounds more hopeful, though nothing is fixed yet. Power of anticipation. Afterwards, Elfric finds Robert waiting by the lich gate, moon silvering his riding boots. He presents the amended contract. Robert skims, smirks, but accepts, pressing his falcon seal onto fresh wax. Deal struck. The Chantry's fate pivots. Over the next days, wagons arrive stacked with wide oak beams and bundles of red clay tiles glittering like dragon scales. Roofers climb scaffold planks that creak against the nave wall. Townsfolk gather to watch, jaws open. Elfric ferries buckets of ale up ladders. Roofers work better lubed, they claim. Meanwhile, Matthias unlocks the treasury chest, counts every penny twice, and still the purse sags thin. The deposit of 50 marks will help come Michaelmas, but daily expenses continue. He decides to reopen the herb garden plot behind the cloister, long neglected. Elfric and choir boys weed feverfew and rue,
planting woad and madder to sell as dye to clothiers. Work pens their minds away from worry.
8 days into repairs, disaster almost cancels salvation. A roofer slips, beam cracks, and he tumbles through a half-open aperture, landing on the choir loft railing. He groans, leg angled wrong. Elfric and Simon carry him to the infirmary bench, splint with willow sticks. The man curses in Norman French, but gratitude glints beneath pain when Elfric recites a prayer over him. Robert, witnessing the scene, presses 3 coins into Matthias's palm. "Cover wages," he says.
Storms roll that night. Thunder shakes the half-finished roof. Water would have cascaded into the nave, but new tiles hold fast. For the first time in years, no drips echo in the dark. Matthias kneels beneath the still scaffolded vault and weeps quietly, a mix of relief and guilt that a thief's gold saved sacred stones.
Yet outside forces seldom sleep. The bishop's vicar rides in unannounced on the 10th day. Word of noble interference in book loans reached diocesan ears, perhaps via jealous rival priests. The vicar, portly, perfumed with sage, demands explanation, impounds the freshly sealed contract, and schedules an ecclesiastical hearing 2 weeks hence. If judged simoniacal, the chantry could forfeit its endowment entirely. Panic returns, sharper than before.
Robert offers legal counsel. He knows a canon lawyer in York who defends questionable patronage cases. Matthias is torn, each favor indebted. But the alternative is ruin. They dispatch Simon at dusk with a letter and small purse to hire the lawyer. 2 ragged mercenaries accompany him as guards through bandit country, a further expense. During these tense fortnight days, Elfric resumes dawn prayers for the dead, voice steady despite churning nerves. And something curious happens. Townsfolk, seeing roof renewal and hearing confident chants, return to morning masses. Offerings increase. A few pennies, a loaf of rye, a bolt of homespun. Small, but hope seldom arrives in large coffers. The hearing convenes in York's chapter house under arches high as ambition. Robert's lawyer argues brilliantly. Loaning books is educational outreach, not simony. Deposit monies ensure protection. Roof repairs fulfill corporate duty of care. The vicar counters. Noble vanity funds astrology, ergo suspect. Ultimately, the dean declares a compromise. The loan practice may proceed under diocesan supervision. 1 canon will inspect each volume before departure and after return. A fee applies, but lesser than ruin. Victory, narrow, wingtip wide. When the priests return, roof complete, beams smelling of sap, they hang new reed-woven mats over pews, and the stain on limewash now sits framed by fresh plaster. Story of survival etched into wall. Robert departs northward with 3 manuscripts sealed in wax, escorted by a canon inspector and 2 friars. As the cart rolls away, Elfric feels both pride and dread. Books so dear slipping beyond horizon, yet future insured by their journey. Night falls. In the cloister garth, Matthias plants a single cutting of rosemary beside the path. For remembrance, he tells Elfric, not of fear, but of prudence. Elfric nods, fingers soil. Slip on your boots, threadbare but dependable, and pull your cloak a little tighter.
Yes, even here in imagination, the moor's wind nips like an insult. Before we slog into the dark, do me one favor. Tap that little subscribe bell so you never miss the next candlelit chapter. And drop a comment telling me whether you'd trust a baron with your library. I read them all, usually while reheating the same bowl of pottage for the 3rd time. All set? Good. Let's walk.
The cart creaks north along the causey road, iron rims grinding in ruts left by wool wagons. The driver, Osbert, spits every dozen paces, swearing the mud sucks like a devil's purse. Behind him sit 3 passengers. Canon Humbert, robes cinched tight, rings flashing whenever he gestures too broadly, plus 2 Grey Friars hired as spiritual guardians. They look more like winter crows, hunched, silent, their cows trembling in wind. In a padded chest at Humbert's sandaled feet lie the Chantry's treasures, the ephemerides of St. Gervase, the illustrated bestiary of Wormgate, and the no less priceless Farmenpolter with its secret eclipse calendar. Each book is swaddled in lamb's wool and sealed under lead tags inscribed Scriptum Sanctum Custodi.
Trailing the cart by half a mile rides Robert de Brieux, again in simple travel garb. He promised the priests he would escort the convoy at a respectful distance. Appearances matter when churchmen fear contamination by noble designs. In truth, he stays back because he's scouting every hedge and hillock for thieves. He knows what valuables look like on the road, and he can practically see the glittering aura of ransom around Humbert's wagon. Meanwhile, in the Chantry's scriptorium, Brother Elfric finishes lacing a rough wool jerkin. Matthias blesses him, then presses 2 items into his hands. A sealed letter of indemnity from the diocesan dean, just in case, and a small reliquary locket containing a splinter of St. Cecilia's comb. For courage, Matthias says. Elfric, already jittering, wonders if courage weighs this heavily on a thin chain. He mounts a borrowed pack pony, its breath steaming like a forge in chilly dawn, and turns west. Officially, he rides to deliver woad contracts. Unofficially, he is backup. Insurance that manuscript and baron both arrive whole. The first day's journey is uneventful, if one discounts Humbert's non-stop complaints about jouncing his spleen loose. The second day, storm clouds wall the horizon like iron gates. By late afternoon, lightning forks between moor hillocks. The road dissolves into soup. Osbert curses, but Humbert insists they push on to reach the crossed staves inn before dark. Robert, knowing the track floods beyond the ferny ridge, urges them to wait under a stand of hawthorn until the worst passes. Humbert brandishes his episcopal writ as if it's a weather charm. They continue. Rain thickens to vertical river, wheels bog, oxen low. At a narrow causeway over mire fen, the cart lurches into a hidden pothole and tilts. One friar leaps, the other clings, face crab white. Chest slides, cracks a side plank, tips out, splash into peat-black water. Humbert shrieks, "Sacrilege!" as the chest bobs, then sinks, swallowed by reeds and oily muck. Robert dismounts mid-deluge, yanking ropes, shouting orders. The friars flail knee-deep, trying to locate the chest with hooked walking sticks. Lightning reveals nothing but ripples. Feeble lanterns are useless. The fen drinks light. By the time Elfric trots into sight, storm-spent, he finds a tableau of despair. Humbert, seated on an overturned bucket, robe muddied to the waist, whispering a litany of legal catastrophes. Robert stands thigh-deep in sludge, feeling with a spear shaft. The chest is gone. "I know this bog," Robert says when Elfric arrives. "Pete shifts here like a drunkard's mood. Chest could be anywhere under 2 feet of sludge." Elfric wants to cry. Instead, he prays aloud, words lost in dripping willows. Robert mutters, "Prayer won't raise drowned books." They make camp on slightly higher ground, using a torn wagon sheet as lean-to. Night insects thrum. The friars wring their habits. Humbert counts the ways the Chantry will sue him for negligence. Osbert sleeps like a stone. Robert, eyes glinken in firelight, outlines a plan. At first light, they'll recruit peat cutters from Dunwell Hamlet to dredge the fen. He will pay hazard wages. Humbert balks. Diocesan purse strings do not cover mercenary bog divers. Robert lays 2 silver half-groats on a log, his expense. Humbert, greed battling humiliation, nods. Before dawn, Elfric slips away. He carries only the reliquary, Matthias's letter, a coil of rope, and a waxed cloth satchel. He rouses Dunwell's reeve from bed and convinces him to assemble men with turf spades. They march to the fen by lantern. Mist curls like ghosts underfoot. The men form a chain, probing with staves, sliding their arms into frigid water up to the shoulder. Hours pass. Something thuds under a blade. Wood? No. An old eel trap. More probing. Mid-morning, a shout. A hinge glints. Together they haul a sod-slimed chest, water streaming from seams. Humbert rushes forward, grasping at soaked lambswool coverings. Locks still fast, but water doubtless seeped inside. Panic surges again about warped vellum, running inks. Elfric kneels, murmurs a blessing, then works the lock key. Inside, each manuscript is clammy but intact. Lambswool wicked most moisture. Wax tags held. Pages ripple, pigments blur along edges, but words remain readable. Humbert crosses himself thrice, almost smiling. Robert pays the peat cutters and adds a jug of ale. He then insists the books ride the rest of the journey strapped to separate backs, not in a wagon. Humbert grumbles, but after that baptism, even he concedes. The friars sling 2 volumes. Robert himself carries the bestiary. 4 miles on, the road enters pine forest. Shadows crowd noonlight, resin scent masking damp parchment musk. At a shallow ford, 3 figures step from cedars, men in quilted jacks, knives gleaming. "Toll for passage," their leader says. Typical bandits. Robert rides ahead, flicks his cloak aside to reveal a sheathed sword. "This road belongs to the Earl," he says. "His men patrol hourly." Bandit laughs, revealing a gap-toothed grin. "Then we'll finish quick." The standoff snaps when a friar loses nerve, bolting sideways, clutching St. Gervais. Bandit 2 pursues. Robert draws, but muddy ground sucks boots. Elfric, clutching the Psalter satchel, experiences an unfamiliar sensation, decisive courage. He kicks his pony forward, swinging the coil of rope like a flail.
The rope's brass weight catches bandit leader across temple. He staggers. Elfric's pony rears, hooves flailing. Humbert, surprisingly limber, hurls a handful of road gravel into Bandit 3's eyes. Chaos blooms.
Robert regains footing, sword arcs. Bandits retreat into pines. The friar emerges, terror-struck but unharmed, manuscript dry inside waxed case. Heartbeats hammer in collective chest. Robert sheathes sword. "No toll today," he says with grim humor. Humbert looks at Elfric as if seeing a new saint minted on the spot. Elfric feels ill. Adrenaline tastes sour as rancid ale. That night, they reach the Crossed Staves, the inn they failed to reach days earlier. Robert pays for a private loft where manuscripts dry near the hearth on a lattice of laths. Innkeeper complains about smoke marks on vellum. Humbert offers a blessing instead of coin. Innkeeper snorts, but allows. In the loft's far corner, Robert pulls Elfric aside. "You fought," he says, voice low. "Most clerks faint at a glare." Elfric shrugs, embarrassed. Robert presses a small knife with mother-of-pearl handle into his palm. "Next time, use steel, not rope." Elfric starts to refuse. Robert insists. "A gift for courage." Gift or temptation? He pockets it, silently vowing never to draw blood. Morning sun glitters on frost-white grass, first bite of winter. They ride the last league to Robert's Manor, a stout stone hall ringed by orchards stripped bare. Servants unload the books into a warmed solar, where Robert's astrologer cousin, Lady Evelina, awaits among charts and brass instruments. She handles the psalter with reverence, eyes shining at the eclipse calendar. She thanks Humbert with a purse of extra coins for the trouble. Humbert's outrage at bog and bandits melts in silver clink. As per contract, the canon inspector documents each folio's condition, sealing a parchment report with his seal, then stows it, supposedly, to forward to the diocese. Secretly, he pockets a loose illustration of a manticore, snipped from the bestiary's corner while others were distracted. Greed dies hard. Elfric notices the missing corner later that night as he and Robert dine. Alarm bells in his head. "A page is torn," he whispers. Robert curses softly. A defaced loan invites lawsuit. They confront Humbert, who blusters ignorance until Robert threatens to inform the bishop. Shaken, Humbert retrieves the snippet from his purse. "For my nephew," he mutters. Robert forces him to seal it back using beeswax and parchment thread. The mend is crude but serviceable. Over the next 40 days, Elfric remains at the manor. He tends a temporary altar in the chapel, leads dawn prayers for Robert's dead father, part of the deal. He also copies notes from Evelina's star charts, fascinated by how lunar nodes overlay saint feast days in her predictions. Evelina, impressed by his steady script, teaches him to grind verdigris into green ink. Their partnership grows like ivy, quiet, persistent. 1 week before the return journey, snow blankets the North Road. Oxen cannot pull carts. Travelers hole up in alehouses. Robert proposes sending the manuscripts back by river barge instead, downstream to the cathedral port. Humbert scowls. Water again. But barge is safer than footpaths full of cut purses in winter starve time. They pack books into lead-lined caskets, waterproofed with pitch. Evelina adds oilcloth parcels of her calculations for Matthias.
Proof their books bore fruit beyond astrology. Tables predicting optimal sowing moons for peasants, perhaps placating ecclesiastical critics. Elfric volunteers to accompany the barge. Robert consents, gifting him a fur-lined mantle against chill. They depart at dawn, barge gliding under gray sky. Ice floes bump hull like ghost fish. Crewmen sing rough carols about ale and angels. Elfric hums along, heart lighter. Mid-voyage, an ice jam blocks the river near Darkwater Weir. Boatmen anchor, waiting for thaw. 2 nights past, the jam cracks like cannon. Surge spins the barge. Casks slide. A lid splits. Inside, the bestiary again at risk. Elfric and the steersman lash the crate shut while ice shards slam hull. Fingers numb, but resolve hot. Finally, they reach Cathedral Creek. Cannon officials inspect cargo. Note the mended page. They raise eyebrows. Elfric presents Humbert's sworn statement, blaming vermin damage before packing. Official shrugs. Margins torn often. Manuscripts pass. When Elfric rides the final miles home, snow glittering under stars, chantry bells peal welcome. Roof holds, herb garden sleeps beneath straw. Offering trug overflows with flaxseed for spring. Matthias embraces him like lost kin. They lock the books in the armarium, each folio now bearing a story heavier than ink. Later, in candlelit chapter, Matthias reviews Evelina's sewing tables. "Useful," he murmurs. "Perhaps we publish them for the Shire." Elfric grins, imagining peasants praising star-blessed harvests birthed from near disaster. Simon records the ledger. Roof fully paid, peat divers reimbursed, barge fees settled, and a modest surplus, enough to refinish that lime-wash stain properly. Outside, the bruise-colored sky of weeks ago clears to velvet, stars sharp. Elfric places Robert's knife in the sacristy chest, temptation relinquished. He lifts St. Cecilia's reliquary, feels its weight, now more promise than burden. Then he steps into dawn, ready for the next whispered request from souls living and dead who believe prayer and courage can outlast storms. Wind slithers along the flagstones, carrying a smell of wet hay and the faint sweetness of crushed rosemary. Brother Simon stands in the yard, clutching his skull like it might roll clean off his shoulders. Yesterday, the revelers from Shiremoot stopped for Vespers and convinced him, purely for ecumenical diplomacy, of course, to sample their spiced apple mead. 4 goblets later, diplomacy triumphed, sobriety did not. Now Simon's face has the pallor of old parchment. The infirmerer, Sister Avis, presses a crock of wilted horehound under his nose. "Sip," she commands. Simon groans something about oaths against poison. Elfric arrives, still humming Compline hymns, and volunteers to escort Simon to the herbarium. He's no physician, but since rescuing those priceless books from bog and brigands, he's grown reckless with confidence. Avis hands him a folded parchment, her recipe for a hangover purge, and wags a warning finger. Mandrake root is only for sleeping draughts. Touch nothing that screams. Simon manages a whimper. Elfric assures him that tonight's business is strictly mint, rue, and a dash of holy optimism. They shuffle toward the herb garden, each breath blooming white. Lanterns bob ahead, 2 novices tasked with gathering winter savory for the refectory stew. Their thin sandals crunch on frozen earth. Beyond the trellises rises the timber-framed herbarium shed, its shutters rattling like dice in a copper beaker. A feeble glow leaks through cracks. Evidently, someone is already inside. Elfric eases the door open. Warm air rushes out, hearth embers coaxing rosemary bundles to release their scent. Candles gutter on a central workbench strewn with mortar pestle sets, jars of powdered bark, bundles of dried yarrow, and a single ceramic bowl of, well, it looks like mashed figs, but the odor suggests fermented radish. Standing over it is Brother Anselm, the Chantry's resident herbal savant, spectacles fogging as he mutters.
"Experiment?" Elfric asks, easing Simon onto a stool.
Anselm startles. "Ah, Brother Courage," his new nickname for Elfric since the bog incident. Yes, I'm refining a soporific cordial. The sub-prior requested something to quiet Brother Crispin's night terror sermons." He pinches a yellow powder. "Ground lettuce seed calms the humors." Simon makes a strangled sound. Elfric unfolds Avis's parchment. "Different crisis, brother. We need a draft to quiet his skull, not his soul." Anselm cocks a brow. "Hangover cures? Pah, easiest remedy is penance and a bucket. But very well, let's brew you a potion that won't offend Saint Benedict's liver." He rummages through shelves, selecting peppermint, crushed willow bark, and a twist of ginger. Into a copper kettle he pours rainwater collected from the cloister gutters, pure enough if you ignore pigeon footprints. While the mixture simmers, he asks Elfric to fetch fresh valerian from the garden beds behind the shed. Elfric steps outside. Moonlight silvers the beds, each mound labeled with little slate tablets. He bends, knife poised above a tangle of roots, when a rustle draws his eye to the hedge. A figure, hooded, slips between shadow and moonbeam. Elfric straightens. The figure freezes, then darts toward the north wall. Reflex overrides caution. He dashes in pursuit, lantern swinging. Simon lurches to the door, moaning. Anselm barks after Elfric, but too late. The night has swallowed him. Moonlight paints milky stripes across the orchard. Elfric pursues footprints, fresh dents in brittle grass. Lantern shows a tuft of wool snagged on briar. Sheep thief? No, lambing season months away. He hears breath, ragged behind the apple press. Reckless still, he rounds the beam and collides with a cloaked woman. They tumble into frost, his lantern skittering, extinguished. She curses in French. Elfric scrambles up, hands raised. "Peace! I mean no harm." She bolts, but he snags her cloak hem. Fabric tears, revealing a satchel clinking faintly. She swings a fist. Elfric ducks. He recognizes her. Lady Evelina, Robert's astrologer cousin whose star tables he copied. What is she doing 70 leagues from Robert's manor? "Brother Elfric!" she gasps, hood dropping to reveal raven hair braided tight. "By Saint Wilfrid, you chase like a mastiff!" He releases the cloak. "I thought a thief." She exhales. "In a sense, I needed vitae stone, dragon's blood resin, and your herbarium's larder is unrivaled." She pats the satchel. "The cathedral chapter commissioned me to calculate Easter's tide tables. Dragon's blood ink endures seawater smears." Elfric frowns.
Why steal? The chantry would share for honest alchemy.
She blushes in moonshine. I tried the front gate after lauds. Simon waved me away, muttering about temptress astronomers. I chose the quieter path.
He sighs. The monk, at fault now, drools over Anselm's concoction. Come back inside. We'll legitimize your borrowing before dawn.
Inside, Anselm eyes the lady like a scholar spotting a living footnote. Over spiced steam, he quizzes her on planetary latitudes. She counters with solar declinations. Simon, head cradled on the table, begs them to debate in whispers. Anselm crushes ginger while Evelina measures honey. The brew thickens into amber syrup. She adds a suspicious pinch of her dragon's blood. Elfric arches a brow. Harmless, she promises, staunches fever. They pour the tonic into a horn cup. Simon sips, shudders, then, within breaths, color returns to his cheeks. He blinks. I can hear the angels again, and they're not banging cymbals. Elfric laughs. Evelina smiles, proud. Anselm hums approval, labeling a jar cordial for excessive diplomacy. Word of the miraculous cordial spreads by midday. Soon, Brother Crispin begs for 2 spoonfuls to hush his nightly visions. The sacristan wants a dram for the bishop's impending visit. Preemptive peace. Anselm groans. His supply of ginger dwindles. More worrying, dragon's blood resin is rare, plundered mostly from Levantine merchants at the annual fair. Evelina offers to guide a procurement mission. She's chartered merchant caravans by star. Thus, 3 nights later, Elfric, Evelina, and Simon, now sworn to sobriety, ride south toward Walkden Fair. The winter market crouched outside a ruined Roman wall. They bring 2 boxes of saffron strands, harvested from the chantry's hotbed frames, to barter. Brother Matthias grants permission, secretly thrilled to send Simon away from ale for a spell. Frost crunches under hoof as they reach Walkden's torchlit sprawl. Tents glow like ember-red mushrooms. Vendors hawk barrels of salt herring, bolts of Flemish wool, iron nails, and relics of doubtful providence. Somewhere a hurdy-gurdy drones above laughter. Simon trembles like a novice at his first confession. "Remember the cordial," Elfric warns. They locate Khalil ibn Jafar's apothecary stall, a rainbow of glass vials stacking precariously. Evelina haggles in flawless Arabic-laced French. Khalil smiles behind henna-stained beard. Dragon's blood traded at 3 dinars per ounce, reduced to 2 when Evelina reveals saffron sachets. Deal sealed. Khalil gifts a sprig of myrrh for the monk with delicate head. Simon bows gratitude. Trade complete. They wander. At a game booth, dice clatter. Simon's vow falters when he smells mulled cider. Elfric notices too late. Simon disappears. Panic clamps chest. Last time Simon vanished, they nearly lost illuminated gospels. Evelina spots him through crowds, inside a betting circle around a wrestling pit, cheering. They elbow through. Simon, flushed, places the last of their travel pennies on a tattooed dwarf grappler. Grappler loses. Pennies vanish. Elfric hauls Simon out by collar. Evelina scolds like a nun. They retreat, pockets lighter.
Worse, a pickpocket cut Elfric's saddlebag during the commotion. Matthias's indemnity letters gone. Without them, the diocese could accuse them of rogue trade. Night deepens. They must return before snow forecast by Evelina's star chart blankets roads. But the indemnity forms are vital. Evelina suggests seeking Warkton's unofficial bailiff, Thorneye Ruald, who brokers retrieval of stolen goods for a fee. They find his tent beyond the ale rose, marked by a boar skull lantern. Ruald greets them with one blind socket glittering. He'll locate the letters by dawn, for half their dragon's blood. Reluctantly, Elfric agrees. They lodge in a hayloft above stable fumes. Simon snores contrite. Evelina and Elfric sit against a beam, sharing oatcakes. She confesses longing for scholarly fellowship. Cathedral canons dismiss her stargazing woman's fancy. Elfric admits his own doubts. He loves words, but sometimes suspects he's meant for journeys, not cloisters. They talk until candle gutters. At gray dawn, Ruald appears, clutching a scroll bundle. He found the thief, a boy of 12, letters intact, fee paid. They ride home under sleet, Simon's hangover tonic clinking. Half day out, a broken bridge forces detour through Aldermere Forest. Snow thickens, muffling hooves. They glimpse figures half hidden, woodcutters? But axe handles glint like pikes. Robbers again? Elfric's heart hammers. Evelina whispers, bandits prey here. Simon fumbles for courage, patting cordial jar like talisman. A shadow steps forth. Thin woman in patched cloak. Not bandits, refugees. Behind her huddled children, gaunt, cold. Their hamlet burned in border skirmish. They head to cathedral seeking alms. Evelina dismounts, offers dried apples. Elfric gives his cloak. Simon passes the cordial jar to the eldest lad, explaining a single drop eases fever. They leave supplies and help fashion a lean-to before pressing on. Snow lashes harder. Twilight finds them still hours from home. They spy firelight in ruined chapel ruins. Inside, a hermit welcomes travelers. He recognizes Evelina's star token. He once studied under the same Moorish astronomer. He boils nettle soup while recounting legends of comets foretelling kings' graves. Simon listens, wide-eyed. At dawn, storm abates. They reach Chantry gates by terse bells. Matthias meets them, fretful, then relieved. Dragon's blood secured, indemnity letters safe, Simon sober, for now. Anselm brews a fresh batch of cordial, adding Khalil's myrrh. He christens it Evelina's Mercy. Days pass. The cordial becomes famed. Farmers trek miles for remedies. But dragon's blood dwindles again. Anselm proposes cultivating native aloes to create a substitute resin. Evelina draws greenhouse plans warmed by tallow lamps and reflected sunlight. Elfric organizes novices to build frames. Simon manages supply ledgers, pen scratching with newfound diligence. Spring's first crocus pushes through thaw, purple as bruise. The greenhouse skeleton stands. Evelina prepares to depart. Robert's Manor expects her for equinox rites. At dusk, she and Elfric walk the garden, scent of thawed earth rising. She presses into his palm a tiny vial, stardust fleck ink. "For your own manuscripts," she says. He stammers thanks. They part at the gate, promise scholarly letters. That night, Ælfric writes by that ink under single candle, beginning a chronicle of recent trials: the bog, the bandits, the cordial, the refugees. He titles it Miracula et Miseria. Pages shimmer faintly. Outside, bells toll Compline. Snowmelt drips. The chantry dozen kneel in choir, chanting prayers for unknown souls adrift on storm roads. Among them, Simon, voice steady. Anselm clutches a flask of Evelina's mercy, heart already inventing his next cure, maybe mandrake in tiny, safe doses. And somewhere beyond frost-silver fields, Lady Evelina lifts her eyes to a night sky blooming with meteors, whispering that courage can shine ink-bright even in monks who chase thieves through orchard shadows. Shake the sleep from your skull, friend. Lauds is only a handful of heartbeats away, and whatever dream you just crawled out of is about to look tame beside the dawn we're walking into. Before the first bell rings like iron ice in the tower, do the good deed. Click subscribe so you can stumble back into these midnight corridors whenever the candles flare again. And drop a comment telling me the strangest place you've ever watched the sunrise. I promise our chantry roof will top most entries before we're finished. All right, blanket off, boots on, breath frosting. Follow me through the cloister door one last time. The air tastes of copper and candle ends. Brother Ælfric stands outside the scriptorium, clutching the vellum draft of Miracula et Miseria to his chest. It's only half illuminated, but tonight that doesn't matter. The bishop is coming to hear the refugees' petition, and Ælfric means the manuscript to persuade him. Trouble is, the parchment's gold leaf has buckled in the damp, and the scarlet pigments are so thin they look like faded rose petals. He mouths a silent prayer to Saint Dunstan, patron of writers and last-minute miracle workers. Inside, Brother Anselm shuffles herbs on a brazier. Dragon's blood resin is gone. The first frost killed half the aloe cuttings. Yet the line of peasants at the infirmary door is longer than ever, coughing, limping, whispering about the mercy cordial. Anselm's beard bristles with worry. He can't dilute the recipe again without turning the medicine into flavored water. He mutters to himself, measuring feverfew, then remembers tonight's eclipse, the blood moon, when according to every herbal authority, medicines brewed absorb tenfold potency. If only he had one vial of real dragon's blood. Torchlight flickers along the cloister walk. Brother Simon appears, carrying a crate of beeswax candles for the vigil. He's been sober 48 nights and counting, but his hands shake, this time from nerves. The bishop's entourage has a reputation. They expect flawless chanting, perfectly tuned psaltery, and anthems loud enough to drown the north wind. Simon's tenor has cracked since the bog incident. He fears it might split entirely in front of the mitred lord. Across the garth, Sister Avis folds linen over a bundle that squeaks, an orphaned hedgehog snuffling through her herb garden. She intends to release it beyond the walls before dawn, lest the kitchen novices seize it for stew. Hedgehogs devour slugs, she says, and slugs devour the new aloe shoots. Hedgehog stays. And overhead, the moon, already nibbling itself into shadow, begins the slow slide toward total eclipse. Just after Compline, hooves clatter on the frozen lane. Bishop Ranulph arrives with 6 canons, 2 deacons, a scribe, and 1 bodyguard who looks like a siege tower in chainmail. They sweep into the chapter house, breath billowing, complaining about devilish fog. Matthias bows so low his knees pop. The bishop demands mulled wine. Simon offers cordial instead. Ranulph raises an eyebrow at a monk hawking elixirs like an apothecary, but he is cold, so he drinks.
Moments later, Ranulph's ears redden, not from heat, but from fury. The cordial's ginger scorches his sinuses. Who brewed this infernal tincture? Anselm steps forward, trembling. The bishop waves the cup. Miraculous, yes. Make 20 more by dawn. You'll administer them to my canons. They're weary. I need them vigorous to debate these beggars' claims. Anselm opens his mouth. No resin, but closes it again. He bows. Orders are orders. Elfric maneuvers through the bustle, clutching his manuscript. He presents it to Bishop Ranulph's scribe, a narrow-eyed cleric named Brother Laurentius. Laurentius sneers at the buckled gold leaf. Substandard gilding, hardly fit for diocesan archives. He dumps it on a side table. Elfric's heart sinks. Evelina arrives an hour past moonrise, cloak dusted with road frost. She rode back hard after charting the eclipse from a hilltop observatory. Bursting into the warming room, she finds chaos. Novices hauling benches, Simon coaching the choir, Anselm ransacking shelves. She corners Elfric. Why the panic? He explains the bishop's demand for cordial and the missing resin. She taps her satchel. I brought samples of a local gum from sweet chestnut trees. My experiments suggest similar binding properties to dragon's blood. Anselm overhears, hope kindling. They hurry to the herbarium to test it. As they brew, the eclipse deepens. The moon, veiled red, throws strange rust-colored light across the still cloister pond. They finish a test batch, cork it, hurry toward the refectory where the bishop warms by fire. Yet just outside the kitchen, the siege tower bodyguard blocks the corridor. "Inspection," he grunts, snatching the vial. He uncorks it, sniffs, recoils, then, to Anselm's horror, gulps the liquid. A second later, his knees buckle. He slumps against the wall, snoring like a bellows. Evelina stares. Dosage needs adjusting. Anselm whispers a prayer. They drag the unconscious god into the buttery and prop him behind ale barrels. No time to refine the tonic. They need more sweet chestnut gum. But the chestnut grove lies outside the walls. Simon volunteers. I'll fetch it and test my sobriety against temptation. Avis insists the orphans she tends will provide cover. Dusk is her friend. Elfric and Evelina accompany him, slipping through the postern gate. Snow has crusted hard. Boots crunch like grinding teeth. Midgrove. Wind moans through branches. They chip gummy resin from bark by lantern glow. Suddenly, shapes emerge. 3 figures with cudgels. Highwaymen seeking pilgrims' purses. One sneers, teeth like broken tombstones. "Hand over the lantern, monks!" Elfric steps forward, quoting the rule of Saint Benedict about peace. The robber swings cudgel. Simon, unexpectedly agile, deflects it with the resin jar. The jar shatters, spraying gum onto the robber's face. Wind howls, lantern sputters.
The broken jar's contents ignite in cold air, a faint spark from flint striking metal wristband. The gum flashes like pitch, momentarily blinding the thieves. They flee howling.
Evelina stares at the smolder. Gum is flammable. Interesting.
They gather remaining resin and race back. On return, they find the buttery god still dozing. Choir stalls fill with dignitaries chanting psalms. Eclipse nears totality. Anselm boils new cordial, reducing dose. Laurentius barges in. Hurry, the bishop's humor's sour. Anselm thrusts a cup at him. Laurentius sips gingerly. Eyes widen, but he nods. He whisks tray to the refectory. In the chapel, candlelight flickers crimson as Eclipse shadow completes. Ranulph seats himself. Refugees shuffle in. Among them, the thin-cloaked woman and children Elfric aided. She kneels, presenting charred village tokens. The bishop's deacons prepare to question authenticity. Then, faint rumble. Roof timbers shimmy. Snow weight plus heat of packed bodies has loosened a cracked beam. A splinter drops onto the bishop's mitre. He looks up, sputters. Another splinter falls, ember glowing. Lantern above, snagged on failing rope.
Elfric sees it first. He shouts. Choir scatters. The lantern plummets toward Ranulph. Before thought, Simon lunges, catches lantern midair, but oil spills, igniting his sleeve. Evelina yanks her cloak around his arm, smothering flames. Pew benches tip, parchment scattering. In chaos, Elfric dives for his manuscript, now kicked underfoot. Rafter creaks louder, a crack like thunder. Anselm, thinking only of trapped medicine stores below, rushes to prop a support beam with choir lectern. Evelina joins, heaving. Wood groans, but beam holds, barely. Refugees huddle, children crying. Ranulph, soot on mitre, stares at burning oil ring on floor. Laurentius tries to douse it with holy water. Successful, ironically. Silence falls, but for cracking beam. Uvis bursts in, hedgehog in arms. Roof rats! They gnawed the rafter join! She reveals gnawed wood. Bishop glares, but then his gaze softens toward refugee children. If rats endanger God's house, what of wolves at their homesteads? He signals deacons. We will hear their plea after repairs. Elfric, still sprawled, holds up his battered manuscript, ink glinting starlight red from Eclipse. Laurentius picks it up, notices star fleck ink unblurred by oil. He murmurs admiration. Ranulph asks where such ink was made. Laurentius points to Elfric. Ranulph nods. Courage and craft in equal measure. He orders copyists to replicate Elfric's chronicle, ink recipe included. Simon, sleeve charred, stands. Choir resumes a humble hymn. Eclipse shadow lifts. Moon glows silver. The roof beam steadies as temperature drops and rats scatter from lantern light.
Morning.
Snowmelt drips like metronome. Work teams of monks, villagers, and refugees haul timbers, sharing bread. Anselm serves diluted cordial, now safe. Children giggle at hedgehogs sniffing sawdust. Bishop Ranulph, robe rolled up, swings a mallet, surprising everyone. At midday meal, Ranulph signs a charter granting refugees woodlands to rebuild huts and a tithe exemption for 3 years. He appoints Evelina official diocesan astronomer to consult on calendar reform. She accepts on condition Elfric assists with manuscripts. He stammers, looking at Matthias. Subprior smiles, proud. Simon raises a cup of watered cordial in toast, vows to guard roof beams nightly, sans mead. Everyone laughs. That evening, Elfric and Evelina climb repaired rude loft to watch sunset ignite snow. She hands him a new vial, chestnut gum ink perfected. He presents a fresh folio leaf embossed Liber Stellae et Cordalius. They sit, copying constellations and cordial formulas side by side until stars blink. Below, Anselm teaches novices to distill peppermint under moonbeams. Avis releases hedgehog into thawing herb beds, confident slug population is doomed. Simon hums a chant that no longer cracks. The bells hush, wind rests, and if you listen close, you can hear the soft ticking of snow melting from tiles, like quills scratching parchment, writing the next chapter no chronicler has yet imagined. Now draw blankets high. Remember that even broken rafters can birth new constellations, and the hum of community is the finest lullaby. If this vigil kept you company, like and share so fellow night owls can find the warmth of these cloister fires. Until the next impossible tale, sleep easy, and may your dreams never smell of mulled mead at Compline.